Hi everyone, welcome back to 90 Days of Good News. This is day 50 of our New Testament 90, and today we look at Matthew chapters 7, 8 and 9. Now a little recap on yesterday. We started by looking at Jesus' temptation out in the wilderness, which is where his ministry sort of jump-started. He'd had that really powerful, intense time, and then he went out. Crowds began to gather around him. He called his first disciples, and he began the famous Sermon on the Mount, which we looked at really in depth yesterday. We continue on that today. Chapter 7 is full of the Sermon on the Mount. He talks about judgment. He also talks about almost a self-awareness, being really aware of the path that we're on and the things that we allow to affect us and around us. And then we move on to Jesus' healing ministry. Now, chapters 8 and 9 are full of incredible stories of healing, and some of them are some of the most powerful ones that you read in the Bible. And right in the middle of that, smack bang in the middle of that, is this awesome display of Jesus' power over nature as he calms the storm where him and the disciples are crossing over the lake. It's just so incredible, and there's so much to look at today, and I'm really excited. So yeah, let's get started. I'll begin as I always do by praying. Lord in heaven, thank you that today we get to witness some of the amazing displays of power that come from you. Not just, and power from so many different ways. We get some incredible teaching, some warnings against the things that we can avoid, the things that we should be staying away from, but also some amazing just look at the works that you've done. Looks at the fact that you are a God of compassion, that you have such a heart to heal people of diseases, of illnesses, and of things that are holding them back in their lives. Lord, you are just so awesome, and thank you that we do get to read these amazing stories about you, this amazing truth of your life. And I just pray that what you want to say will be the thing that stands out to each of us, that you will just impact each of us today as we recognize that you are a God who listens to our prayers. You are a God who has authority over so many things, over health, over nature, over wild and crazy things. God, thank you for that, and help us to recognize that in you today. Amen. Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge, or you... Come on, right. Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, who you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus by their fruit you will recognize them. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cleansed of leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer a gift of the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord," he says, "my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus said to him, "Shall I come and heal him?" The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed, and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and west, and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done just as you have believed it would." And his servant was healed at that moment. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out spirits with a word, and healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. "He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases." When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, and so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and waves obey him." When he arrived at the other side, in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men came from the tombs and met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. The whole town went to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Jesus stepped into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own town. Some men brought to him a paralyzed man lying on a mat. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the man, "Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven." At this, some of the teachers of the law said to themselves, "This fellow is blaspheming." Knowing their thoughts, Jesus said, "Why do you entertain evil thoughts in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the paralyzed man, "Get up, take your mat and go home." And the man got up and went home. When the crowd saw this, they were filled with awe, and they praised God, who had given such authority to man. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting on a tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told them, and Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but those who are ill. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. Then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." While he was saying this, a synagogue leader came and knelt before him. "My daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live." Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. Then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be healed." Jesus turned and saw her. "Take heart, daughter," he said. "Your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed at that moment. When Jesus entered the synagogue's leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, "Go away. The girl is not dead but asleep." But they laughed at him. After the crowd had been put outside, he went in, took the girl by the hand, and she got up. News of this spread through all that region. As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. And he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." But they went out and spread the news about him all over the region. While they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute, spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel." But the Pharisees said, "It is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons." Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." That's the end of our readings for today, and we will continue with Matthew tomorrow. So obviously we've read quite a lot today. There's quite a lot of the sort of chapters of the gospel tend to be a little bit longer than the letters, but I just wanted to say a few things, particularly about those miracles. Now they seem to be almost grouped into like things that are revealed about Jesus and things that we see him doing that say something about his character and something about what he expects of us. Now the first thing is that for almost every miracle that he is requested of him, so this comes from the centurion, from the blind man, from the woman, from the man whose daughter has died, from so many of particularly those healing miracles, and even actually the miracle of the storm being calmed. That was people requesting something, and for the majority of those, not every single one, for the majority of them, Jesus replies with, "Your faith has healed you." Or in the case of the storm, he actually says, "You have little faith." Because what he's saying to his disciples at that point is, "You've seen me acting, you've seen me performing these amazing miracles. I'm in the boat with you. My presence is enough to give you confidence in me. I don't have to do something in order for me to be here, to be protecting you." And I think that's something that, just to like pinpoint on that particular, within the storm, he calms the storm and his presence should be enough. That it's almost a picture of when you are in a storm of life. So when something horrible is going on around you, or something drastic or stressful or just so difficult, the presence of Jesus is enough to calm you. It might not calm that situation, not unless you're really specifically asking for intervention, and even then, answered prayer and unanswered prayer is such a huge subject. But the point of this is that Jesus is calling his disciples to have faith in his presence, have faith in him. And this is actually very soon after us reading the about the faith of a centurion, a non-Israelite. This is a Roman man, someone who's actually an invader in this land, coming and telling Jesus that I have such faith in you, you don't need to come to my home. This is a man who has not been brought up in the synagogue, wouldn't really necessarily know the teaching of the history of Israel or the past or anything to do with Moses or Isaiah, or the Psalms of the prophets or anything like that. All he knows is he sees Jesus and he sees a man of authority. Sees a man who heals with authority and who speaks with authority. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, the people see Jesus' authority, and that's how they begin to trust in him. They recognize Jesus has authority over health, over healing, over the natural things of the world. I mean, even the disciples recognize that he is the one. If Jesus, help us, you can help us out of this storm. Now, they didn't put faith in the fact that his authority is present even when he's asleep. But what they did do was recognize that he would have authority over the waves and over the storm. And that is what we sort of see. It's a huge theme throughout this entire thing. He has authority not only over the bodies, but over the mind, over those who are subject to, they call them demon possessed, and whether or not they actually physically are is completely a totally different subject as well. I believe in the Bible, so I believe it tells the truth. But yeah, authority over outside spiritual forces that are coming to attack and to overcome us. Jesus has authority over those things, and we are taught not to fear those things, but instead to fear the fact that we are on the side of this incredible, all-powerful, almighty God. And so we see within these passages his display of power over these things, his power to heal, his power to calm the waves, his power to cast out demon-possessed people. But we also, his authority. Now, my church recently did an amazing sermon on the authority in prayer. So trusting that we have that authority living within us as well, because the Holy Spirit lives within us. So we are given the privilege of being able to walk to the throne of God in our hearts and pray with authority. And that's what Jesus does here, time and time again. He heals with authority. He takes his place as king in the way he speaks, in the way he acts, in the things that he chooses to do and say. And it's just such an amazing, like I say, these few chapters are just such an amazing image of who Jesus is as a man of power. And we finished today's, there's a very short sort of description right at the very end there. We also see Jesus' motivation. So we have the Sermon on the Mount, which is the culmination of his teaching. He really encourages us to follow the narrow way, to be aware of our surroundings, sort of aware of what's going on around us, the influences, the people that we're spending time with, and what we actually believe in. He talks a little bit about false teaching, which is something we covered recently in some of Paul's letters, to be really question the things that you're being taught and make sure that they hold up against the Bible. Don't just follow whatever sermon that you've heard, but question it, talk about it, consider it. God's asking us and requiring of us to be active with his word, not to just take things on face value, but to actually, if you want to believe and trust in Jesus, get to know him, dig into it a little bit more, ask the questions and wrestle with God a little bit. That's how you learn, that's how you grow. So that's part of his teaching. We then move on to this image of the authority figure, the authority over demons, the authority over healing, the authority over so many things. And we get that description from the centurion, which is just such an awesome picture of faith. We get the fact that Jesus wants us to have faith in him. And then in chapter 9, its mercy stands out above everything else. Jesus actually opens with, the beginning of that chapter, we have this picture of Jesus saying, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. It's not the righteous who need me, it's the sinners. He isn't just going to hang out with those people who have been praying their entire lives. He wants to hang out with the people who have never prayed once. He wants to spend time on them because he had mercy on them, because he wants them to inherit the kingdom. He wants everybody to inherit the kingdom. He has such compassion on people, and that is so prevalent, particularly in chapter 9. It's just such the tone of mercy throughout that. And at the end of that chapter, he says that he wants his disciples, his followers, to go out. It says that the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. At this point in time, Jesus is doing all the miracles taken by himself. He's doing the preaching by himself. Within the next few chapters, we begin to see him sending out his disciples to preach, to pray, and to heal with people, because he wants people to receive the same mercy that his disciples have received, because he has compassion on them. And that's such a beautiful thing to end today's readings on. So we are going to continue tomorrow, beginning with him sending out the disciples. And yeah, I'm excited to continue reading this gospel along with you. I hope everybody is staying safe and well, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.